Story 1. The Haunted Trail of Whispering Pines. Whispering Pines National Park was renowned for its breathtaking scenery, drawing hikers and nature enthusiasts from all over. But hidden deep within its ancient forests was a trail shrouded in mystery and dread. The Whispering Trail. Sarah had always been drawn to the wilderness, its untamed beauty calling to her like a siren's song. When she heard of the Whispering Trail, with its tales of eerie whispers and strange occurrences, she knew she had to experience it for herself. On a crisp autumn morning, Sarah set out on the trail, the leaves crunching beneath her boots. The forest was alive with the colors of fall, the air filled with the earthy scent of pine. As she hiked deeper into the woods, the atmosphere changed. The once cheerful chirping of birds fell silent, replaced by an eerie stillness. The trees seemed to close in around her, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Sarah pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear faint whispers on the wind, unintelligible words that sent shivers down her spine. The trail twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the heart of the forest. Strange symbols appeared on the trees, carved into the bark with jagged edges. A sense of unease settled over Sarah as she approached a clearing. In the center stood an ancient, gnarled tree, its branches twisted and contorted like the limbs of a tortured soul. As she drew closer, Sarah heard the whispers grow louder, the words forming a haunting melody that seemed to echo through the clearing. Suddenly the tree came alive, its branches lashing out with a life of their own. Sarah screamed as she was ensnared by the twisted limbs, their cold grip tightening around her. Desperate to escape, she struggled against the tree's grasp, but it was no use. The whispers grew louder, their voices filled with malice and hunger. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah broke free from the tree's clutches and ran, the haunting melody following close behind. She stumbled out of the clearing and back onto the trail, her heart pounding in her chest. As she fled through the forest, the whispers pursued her, their voices echoing through the trees. Sarah knew then that the Whispering Trail was no ordinary hiking path. It was a place of darkness and dread, where the spirits of the forest hungered for the souls of the unwary. Story 2. The Lost Hikers of Shadow Ridge. Shadow Ridge was a rugged, unforgiving terrain, known for its treacherous trails and unpredictable weather. It was the kind of place where one wrong turn could lead to disaster, and hikers were warned to stay on the marked paths. James and his friends Mike and Emily were seasoned hikers, accustomed to the challenges of the wilderness. But when they set out on a weekend expedition to Shadow Ridge, they had no idea of the horrors that awaited them. The trail started out innocently enough, winding through dense forest and rocky outcrops. The sun was high in the sky, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. As they hiked, Emily noticed strange symbols etched into the trees. A series of concentric circles, each one darker and more ominous than the last. "Have you guys seen these?" she asked, her voice tinged with unease. James and Mike glanced at each other, their expressions grim. They had heard of the legends surrounding Shadow Ridge, tales of lost hikers and mysterious disappearances. Ignoring their growing sense of unease, they pressed on, determined to reach the summit before nightfall. But as the hours passed, the trail became increasingly difficult to navigate. The markers seemed to vanish, leaving them disoriented and lost. Panic set in as darkness fell, the forest cloaked in an inky blackness. James could hear the distant sound of footsteps echoing through the trees. But when he turned to look, there was no one there. "We need to find shelter," Mike said, his voice tense with fear. They stumbled through the darkness, their only guide the faint glow of their flashlights. The air grew colder, and James could feel eyes watching them from the shadows. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a clearing, the ground covered in strange symbols and markings. A sense of dread washed over them as they realized they had stumbled upon an ancient burial ground. With a sinking feeling, James knew they were not alone. Shadows moved in the darkness, their forms shifting and twisting with malevolent intent. Desperate to escape, they ran, their footsteps echoing through the night. But the forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, its dark heart refusing to release them. As they fled, James could hear the whispers of the lost hikers of Shadow Ridge, their voices filled with agony and despair. He knew then that they were doomed to join the ranks of the lost, forever wandering the haunted trails of the ridge. Story 3. The Phantom Ranger of Devil's Peak. Devil's Peak was the crown jewel of the mountain range, its towering cliffs and jagged peaks a challenge for even the most experienced hikers. But it was also a place of legends, with tales of a phantom ranger who patrolled the trails, punishing those who dared to trespass. Alex had heard the stories since he was a child, the warnings of the ranger who appeared out of nowhere, his ghostly form cloaked in mist and shadow. Determined to prove his courage, Alex set out on a solo hike to Devil's Peak. The trail was rugged and steep, the air thinning as he climbed higher and higher. As he ascended, Alex felt a strange presence in the air, a chill that seemed to seep into his bones. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of hoofbeats. Ignoring his growing unease, Alex pressed on, the trail narrowing to a thin ledge along the cliff face. The drop below was dizzying, the rocks jagged and unforgiving. Suddenly he heard a voice behind him, a low guttural growl that sent a shiver down his spine. "Turn back," the voice warned, its tone filled with menace. Alex spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. Before him stood the Phantom Ranger, his form cloaked in shadow. "I mean you no harm," Alex stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. But the ranger's eyes burned with a fierce intensity, his gaze unwavering. "You trespass on sacred ground," the ranger intoned, his voice echoing through the mountains. With a wave of his hand, the ranger summoned a gust of wind that sent Alex stumbling backwards. He fought to regain his footing, but the trail seemed to shift beneath him, the rocks crumbling away. Desperate, Alex scrambled to safety, the ranger's ghostly form vanishing into the mist. But the encounter had left its mark on him, a sense of dread that clung to him like a shadow. As he made his way back down the trail, he could feel eyes watching him from the darkness, a presence that followed him all the way back to the base of a Devil's Peak. The Phantom Ranger of Devil's Peak had claimed another victim, his legend living on in the haunted trails of the mountain.